Good afternoon. Now we'll take a look at the internet weather for this week, ending yesterday, July 20th. The graph here, what we are showing is the top 10 most port floats as of yesterday. On the rank side, how it does happen is basically you have a rank and the port number. What's the position of that port number, what we are seeing for the last week, and how much the change or deviation happened since last time we have seen this port. For instance, in the top one is 443, which is HTTPS, and we all know it's a secure version of HTTP, but it's also heavily used nowadays. The change is basically there's nothing changed actually since last week. It's in the top position. Same goes with the second port 23 TCP, which is Telnet, and 445 SMB. 4 is ICMP. But we move on to 1433. Actually, if you look at the top 6 ports, actually they kind of stayed in their places. Nothing moved. That tells basically, I mean, we have to understand this 443, 23, 22, 80. These are all the typically heavily used ports on the internet for various reasons, right? For connectivity. For example, 23 is for Telnet, but it's most often times used by botnets to looking for vulnerable devices. And at number 8 is 3389, which is RDP remote desk protocol, and 81 is actual alternate HTTP, but it's also infamously used by lots of IoT-based botnets. And at the bottom, to sum up, it's 8545 TCP, which is a Ethereum port. Which is one of, I think, a cryptocurrency-related port. And we have talked about this port to be constantly up and down, but it actually gained from one position from last week to sneak into the top 10 position.
No, it seems like it was fairly consistent with the week before, with at least in the top 10, not a whole lot of movement, which is, it's always a little interesting when you don't see a whole lot of movement. Usually we see a few things pop up and down.
Yeah. And maybe I wanted to talk in the next slide. Maybe I'll take this opportunity to at least talk about 443 and 23 right now. I think the 443 TCP as a top position is that we all know recently there was a big vulnerability in big IP F5. Of course, it's been patched. I think since few weeks there is a renewed interest actually looking for vulnerable big IP F5 devices. I think most likely some of this traffic might be related to 443. And 23 TCP, it's by all the IoT botnets, especially Mirai, MoveBot, all these actually are constantly looking for 23 as well as 22 TCP. 445, we all been seeing for since long time. I mean, with the little analysis, then it seems like looking for a vulnerable 445 TCP. For example, WannaCry, as well as Bluekeep, all these SMB-related vulnerabilities being scanned on 445. I think that's one of the reasons that these ports are constantly staying up. But as you pointed out, Ken, I think it is at maybe only few occasions where we have seen at least more than top half of the top ports remain the constant since a couple of weeks. Now, let's take a look at the most sources probing. We will look at the top 10 again here. What the most sources probing indicate is basically if there is an increase in the sources happening on any particular port, most oftentimes it alludes to some sort of a new vulnerability or maybe some sort of exploit come up, and bad actors are looking for that specific port, as well as maybe a botnet is looking for the specific port with new features added in. Those are the things actually which will be reflected from looking at this most sources probing. For example, if we go back to the story, we were looking at the SIGRED. There we kind of looked at 50 through TCP, and the increase in the scan sources actually signifies the interest for looking for that specific port with respect to SIGRED. I think that's how we could able to correlate with some sort of probing happening. Again, let's start with the top ports, 44523 TCP. Again, as we discussed before, I think they're related to big IP as well as IoT-related devices. Number 3 is 8291 TCP, which is actually one of the ports used by microtech device routers. 80221433 I skip over, and the number 7 is 8728 TCP, which is again another port used by microtech routers for administrative purposes. I would go a little bit deeper with some sort of graphs from our common bag activity, looking at 8291 as well as 8728, looking at both of them at the same time. And ending at 10 is 53 UDP. I think most likely this scanning could be related to cigarette exploit, initial packet request. Maybe at some point we will also see 53 TCP jumping into the top 10 rankings here. That being said, let me take to the couple of graphs to explain what I wanted to tell, how the correlation exists between these two microtech routers. Okay, here we are looking at the last 30 days of activity happening on these two ports, 8728 as well as 8291. 8728 is typically used for microtech Winbox, and 8291 as APA ports. These typically used for management purposes for the microtech devices. Excuse me. What we are looking here is on the x-axis we have the timeline since the last 30 days, and on the y-axis we have the number of unique sources we are seeing per hour. For example, if you look at around a third week or maybe end of June, actually, we see a big spike in jump in 8728, 8291. Please remember, actually, this graph is a stacked graph in the sense, actually, 8291, 8728, they both are put on top of each other to show the relation between both the ports. Well, of course, for certain times, most often times, you can see actually these two ports are either spiking up or coming down, and maybe the traffic seems to be at the same levels almost all the same times. That's the reason I wanted to put it in a stack to show the difference and also compare and contrast easily.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Ganesh, how they almost have, obviously the scale is much different, but they almost have the exact same jumps and valleys. Like obviously you said they're both microtech routers, but I wonder if it's, you need to find something on 8291 and then look for something on 8728, or if it's just maybe the same type of vulnerability.
Sometimes, actually, it's a combination of both. I believe based on some information we have in the past, like I think maybe a few months ago, maybe end of last year, there were multiple vulnerabilities in microtech devices, which can be triggered by, I think, 6 or 7 vulnerabilities. The way they can be triggered is they can be daisy chain. For example, in case of daisy chain vulnerability, I think you first, as you pointed out, you leverage 8291 TCP. From there, you pivot into the next port, something like that. In that scenario, I think Winbox and APA ports almost goes in hand because of the admin interfaces they provide.
Do we know why that the scans have recently picked up? It looks like at end of June, because it looks like at the beginning of the month there were not many scans on these two ports, and then really picked up and kind of slowed down a little bit.
Here, the different view of these two ports in this scenario, we were looking at the scan sets instead of the flows in the previous port. But to drive the point, the increase happened at the same time. What happened around this time? Around this time, actually, there was a large DDoS attack noticed by Akamai. I think they said about 800 to 900 packets per second was the traffic they were able to identify and scrub it. I think while we're looking in our analysis, what we found is during this time, there was one specific botnet happened. I think that was responsible for these large DDoS attack in this time frame, which was a MoveBot, which is a derivative of maybe a variant of Mirai. basically MoveBot took the source code, maybe they modified the most of the features from Mirai, and they converted into more like a DDoS botnet. What it was doing is, in that MoveBot actually uses various IoT devices. Some of the devices it used was microchip-based devices. Some ATGs, I think ATG, I meant to say automated tank gauges. Like if you take it, they are all different types of IoT devices. I think by seeing this increase here, most likely the activities related to that MoveBot botnet performing some sort of DDoS. But based on our visibility, I think we could correlate a little bit loosely with that activity related to the largest DDoS attack happened at that time. And since then, after some time, actually kind of tapered down. But as you see, maybe a week after each time, there are smaller and smaller DDoS attack kind of thing. I think in the last few weeks also, there were also some sort of smaller scale attacks happened by the MoveBot-based actors. So I believe this activity somewhat relates to the MoveBot-based DDoS attack. So hope I think that explains your question, Chris.
Yes, yeah, it's very interesting. I'm always very interested in the unusual ports, like this one 8728, rather than the kind of run-of-the-mill 443 scans, 53, 22. Those are usually pretty common. So I think it's really interesting to dig into why these ports are popping up.
Yeah, if we expand on the Ken story, I mean, Ken said patches, right? There are some devices it's not easy to patch. For example, these are router devices. Not a typical user usually goes and checks for patches and patches them. That's the reason these IoT devices are so fond for these botnet operators. They always like to have these IoT devices into arsenal and basically to perform these kind of nefarious activities.
Ganesh, just one point on that is it's interesting too, because oftentimes these IoT devices, they're a device that isn't only difficult to get to maybe physically, but it might be running something or connecting something that can't necessarily be out of service for an extended period of time to update it. So it becomes another kind of critical area in that regard of what happens if we take this out to update it.
Yeah, that's the challenges. I think that's what they're trying to exploit it. The more time it takes to patch a system, a device, I think the longer a botnet can survive.